Hey folks, this is Fernando doing our video for the Modern Survivalist, and in this video I'm going to be talking about relocating outside US, leaving US for you guys thinking about this, and some of the alternatives, some of the countries considered, specifically in this video, Uruguay and Ireland. Probably because I come from South America, and where I am now, I've been getting quite a bit of emails regarding these places. I've been getting, honestly, a lot of emails because of people, Americans, thinking about leaving and relocating outside the United States. I've been getting quite a bit of that. I suppose that these are topics that I do talk about, so people do gravitate towards that and find it online. And these are, of course, things that are going to be covered in my upcoming book, Bugging Out and Relocating. And it's kind of ironic that even though I do have a book about to publish one about relocating, and I do talk about these topics pretty often, that the first thing I would say is just don't do it. Just don't leave the United States. It's not in your best interest. It's not something I would recommend. It seems kind of ironic and a little bit of a contradiction. So, why would you publish a book about relocating, specifically one that is clearly oriented for an American audience, an American readership? The thing is that even though I do not recommend people leaving the United States, especially not leaving the United States, because that's where I would go myself if I could. It's the place where I would recommend most people going of a certain type of mindset and looking for a certain type of lifestyle. Even though I do not recommend leaving, I do think that it's important to have plans laid out just in case that's what you have to do. That's the reason why I'm writing this book. That's the reason why I'm sharing what I learned and what I researched myself, because I believe that no matter where it is that you live, as great as it may be or as bad as it may be, there's always a chance of things going wrong. Especially, unfortunately, because of recent events, this is again going to be something that is timed at the right time, because of the events we're seeing globally and such. Things of kind of getting a little bit scary, even with potential conflicts in some parts of the world and such, and maybe escalating that. You need to have these plans laid out. That much we agree with 100%. And I'm more than happy to share what I've learned, what I've researched, and my opinion on the topic. Having said that, I don't think that running scared right now is the best thing to do for anyone, especially not for an American citizen living in US. For every one of you guys thinking of running away of US, there's 100,000 others that would do pretty much anything to exchange places with you, to be in your shoes. There's people that actually risk their lives to live where you live right now. So, understand that and have you know what? Take it easy and think with a cool head. Lots of the emails I've been getting are, again, about Americans. We want to leave America right now because this is becoming a communist country, or it's becoming a dictatorship, loss of freedom, and Big Brother. Many great points, which in many of them I would agree. But having said that, you're not likely to find what you're looking for elsewhere, and that's the key thing. And this is something that's not only true for Americans, it's true for pretty much everyone else, in terms of there's really never going to be a place like home for you. You're always linked to where you come from. It's not easy. I mean, I've done it. I can tell you it's not easy. It's even if where you come from is clearly worse than where you moved to, where you went, you're always going to be missing something. Where you come from is part of you. It's part of your culture. It's part of who you are. So in our case, it was very clear that we had to leave Argentina. It was not an option anymore for us. It's it's fine when you talk about survival preparedness, like I do all the time, like countless other people do. Sometimes people talking about things they have no real understanding of or real experience with, and maybe think it's cool, it's fun, it's exciting. There's nothing exciting about living in a place where you're always at risk. There's really nothing fun and entertaining about that. You can talk about the best survival end of the world arsenal that there is and such, but you know what? When that risk is every single freaking day and it goes on for years, and there's no zombies coming, there's just bastards willing to shoot you for whatever's in your pocket, and it's not you only, it's your kids, your wife that are at risk as well. It gets old surprisingly fast. It's not entertaining, and it's not a video game, and poverty and misery, there's no cool looking barter town where you're going to be exchanging and bartering ammunition for chickens or whatever. That it's sad, it's depressing, it's frustrating, and it's not a way of living. Even now, we still watch. You know what? We still watch Argentine television because it's one of those ways in which you kind of feel close and maybe see what's going on over there. I mean, man, half the people that you're watching in different programs, I mean, you're talking about politicians like secretaries of state or ministers. These guys themselves are talking about being mugged, having their cars robbed, being carjacked, or seeing the politicians running for president, talking about the time when they, like Mauricio Macri, a politician is going to be running for president, currently the mayor of Buenos Aires, I believe. Talking about the time in which he was held hostage in a box, and he would be in his box looking at a little hole that he had on top, and he would see a gun barrel popping every once in a while and clicking over his head. It's not fun. It's definitely not fun. It's not what you want for your life. So you understand that there's better places to be in, and that's why you sometimes make the call. You make the decision of leaving a country that's clearly no longer good for you, and there's clearly better options. When there's such a clear line, you just do it. But even then, it's hard. Now, it's gonna be especially hard for Americans to do that, because in spite of all the similarities, especially in the Western cultures, especially, across the American continent itself, North America, Central America, and South America, in spite of the different language, they have a way of, and of course the economic differences, huge economic differences. There's a certain thing of Americans, not as United States of America Americans, but Americans as inhabitants of the American continent. They have a certain thing about them, a certain appreciation for individualism, of pursuit for happiness as individuals, that it's not as common, and this is especially strong in the United States. In North America it's especially clear, but across the American continent you have that thing that you don't find a lot of elsewhere. In Europe there's this idea of the socialist thing in Europe in general, it's more visible, it's more part of the culture, and the individualism that is sometimes appreciated across the American continent, and especially in US, it's not looked at with as much of a good thing. It's considered almost like selfish, which some of us just don't see that way and don't agree with. So that's maybe one of the things that you're definitely going to be missing. And there's going to be countless other things. I mean, guys, if you're watching this, you're watching the Modern Survivalist YouTube channel. You're clearly of a certain mindset that it's maybe not the most massive kind of trend. You have a certain way of viewing things, you clearly do have a certain, at least a concern about individual well-being, and you are probably more independent-minded than your average person. So as an American watching the Modern Survivalist channel, chances are you're not going to be as happy elsewhere. And this is understanding that people are different as well. I mean, there's folks that just love things that I would hate myself, or I would not like. Yeah, hate would not be the word, but things that I would not find enjoyable myself. And that's because we're all different people. Same thing as maybe someone is offended or scared or disgusted by firearms, which I like myself. I'm not comfortable with things that other people just absolutely love. Some people just would love the idea of living in Latin American countries with a cultural thing and such, and they see maybe the poverty and misery as things that are not, they look at them as cute and, you know, as interesting, or people that are fascinated by Asian cultures and just love the idea of living in an Asian country, in Japan, in China, or Thailand, and they're just fascinated with the idea of it. And you know, they research it, they look it up on the internet all the time, and maybe they end up moving to Japan or China or whatever, and they just love living in that Asian country. They just adore it, they just love it, and that was what they loved and what they were looking for their entire lives. Even then, there's a good chance that after a honeymoon period, which is like the first year, there's a good chance that it will get old, and you'll start missing, very much so, lots of the things that you had back home. Again, people are, you know, sometimes very different. I mean, I know some people that have a very different view of life. You know, guys that think of maybe living in India as the most spiritual thing they could possibly do, and such. And if you tell, you know, maybe floating down the Ganges River is the epitome and, you know, most important spiritual moment of their lives, I would just see it as a river that smells awfully bad, and it's probably surrounded by floating corpses, and it's not something that I would definitely enjoy. But we're all different. So if you are like that, maybe all my advice makes no sense to you. So that's something that has to be taken into account as well. But chances are 99% of you guys watching this, you will not have that that kind of way of viewing life, and you will not enjoy these things that others may consider spiritual. For you, maybe living in India is living surrounded by poverty, or living in South America, as it was for me. Being surrounded by poverty was not a way of living. For me, waking up every day, taking my kid to school, even if I was sending my own son to a fancy, expensive private school, just walking and seeing people just eating out of the garbage that people in nicer places had thrown. I mean, even watching, you know, small children and eating out of the trash, that was not something I was willing to do. That was not something I wanted for myself, especially not for my kids. You know, so that's definitely something. If you are worried about personal freedoms, personal liberties, and such, stay in U.S. As an American. If you're already in the United States and you're worried about those things, and you're thinking about leaving the United States because of Big Brother, because of big government, take a look at where you're living. Take a look at some of the options you have, some of the different states. If there's maybe a state in a particular, you know, community that fits more your ideals, and you know what, even in each individual state, there's very few of them that would not have a good place to live in. You know, sometimes people talk about the best state and such, and yeah, this is something that I do cover to some extent in my book as well. Best states or most recommended ones. You know, there's really good options in most American states. In most states, this idea that you have to move to the Rocky Mountains or whatever nonsense, I mean, that may float the boat of people that have no idea of what of what they're talking about. But for the kind of preparedness that you're probably looking for, the kind of life that you want, and the things that would increase the way in which you enjoy life, in most states you're likely to find somewhere that fits just that. You don't have to leave absolutely everything behind and move to the Northwest or whatnot. Northwest has great states and such, but so does the East Coast and the South, and there's lots of good places. Maybe living in a large city in a small condo is not your idea of a great way of spending your life. I would agree with that, but in most states, in most of them, you have places where just moving just a few hours away, you have good options, good choices. And sure, you have some states that definitely rank a little bit better than others, but within US you have great options. Moving away from US because of these things, I can pretty much guarantee you're not going to be finding that. But again, that doesn't mean you should not have these plans laid ahead just in case, because you just never know what life throws your way. I mean, I can tell you that much. You know, life always surprises you, sometimes not for the best. And if you ever have to move like that, if you ever have to relocate outside of your country, it's not something that you can do, you know, just pick up your bug out bag and whatnot and run across the border. That's a position in which you don't want to be in. I mean, it may take years to have a good to actually relocate elsewhere for some people. At least doing so in a safe, non-traumatic manner. The more research you do, the more you study these things, the more you plan ahead of time, the better your plans will unfold once you put them once you go for them. If you just think about picking up a bag and buying a plane ticket, the chances are you're not gonna be happy with your decision just a few weeks later. So it's pretty complex, but at the end of the day, for Americans, my advice is to look in your own country. Stay in your own country. Now, if you're looking and trying to find elsewhere to move to, as lots of you guys have been asking about different possibilities and such, Uruguay, it's a good option. It would not be my first option, because for me it was just a matter of crossing the Rio de la Plata, which was just a 3-hour ferry boat trip, and just move there. What's good things about Uruguay? Which are the bad things about Uruguay? Good things is it's still one of the safest South American countries. Its crime is getting a little bit worse, and you know, the levels of crime in South America are nowhere near as good as in more developed countries. But Uruguay would be one of the safest countries, and as always, away from the bigger cities. You know, if you're not staying specifically in Montevideo, there's a good chance you'll be avoiding some of the worst of it. But even in the smaller cities and even little beach towns and such, especially the ones that are more touristy, there are cases of home invasions, break-ins and such. I mean, it's still South America. That's the biggest disadvantage that Uruguay has. You're still in South America. That means that infrastructure is still nowhere near as good as you're probably used to. Everything is a little bit more of a mess than you're probably used to. You'll have queues and lines for senseless, stupid things that just don't make sense for you. They don't make sense for anyone, not even people from Uruguay themselves. But that's just the way it is in South America. That's the way it is in most, pretty much all third world or developing nations, whatever way you want to put it. You just don't see that in travel magazines or lifestyle and such. You see the nice beaches, you see the restaurants, you see some of the good-looking people in those places. You don't see the ridiculously stupid long line that you have for getting cable, for getting TV, for getting a cell phone connection fixed. I mean, stupid stuff that in most cases would be just a matter of a phone call wherever it is that you are. It takes your entire day of waiting in line in a queue for the most senseless, ridiculous things. Buying cars or selling them is a huge mess. I was remembering talking with Tacoa da Silva. I had a great conversation with him. Too bad he didn't. We recorded that. It was for kind of like an interview thing, and he had lived in Brazil for I think a couple of years. And he would mention that this honeymoon period, the first year, I mean, Tacoa, I think he's from Boston, and he moved to Brazil, lived in Brazil for a year or two, then moved back to US. He would mention this, that after, the first few months, everything is new, everything is interesting, and everything is, you see all the things that you looked at in pictures online and such. But then once you're there, you start seeing the negative stuff. You see that buying a good shirt, it costs a fortune. Buying good clothes are awfully expensive, 3-4 times as expensive. Everything is a mess in terms of running errands. It takes your entire day doing some of the most. He actually told me about the time that he went and bought a toaster. Just a simple $10 toaster that maybe costs $50 wherever it is in South America. And he would, of course, the first surprise is the price. Even these ridiculously cheap things in South America are expensive. So he would just pick up a toaster, go pay for it with his credit card, and they would be asking him for ID. Okay, you have your credit card, what about your ID? The thing is that he had never needed to show any ID when buying anything in the United States. You just go with your credit card and he would pay, or maybe a driver's license or something like that. But he didn't have like a Brazilian ID, and that's correct. In South America, most South American countries, you have your national ID document paper, and if they don't see that, in South America, if you don't have the official paper or whatever, and you have something else, you have a driver's license from another country, immediately it's assumed that it's fake. Because there's so much corruption, there's so much scams going on, that anything that doesn't look, that isn't the exact same thing they're asking for, it's not accepted. Because that's the way things are in South America. Everything is, there's always so much scams and things going on that they will not accept it. So he had to explain that he was an American, and he went through a long mess so as to buy a toaster with a credit card, something that anywhere in the world is just a matter of picking up and paying for it. So those are all the things that you don't see, and you start, maybe you see them right away, but they don't bother you as much at first, and after some time goes by, it starts bothering you even more, and after a year it gets really, really old. What about Ireland? I think it's a good option. I think it's a great option, really. It's different than US because of the things I've mentioned. It's not America. You will not be living the same way you live in America, in Ireland. It's a different culture. It's a different way. Europe in general is different, and Ireland is no exception. It's very safe. That much you can say. Everything looks nicer, tidier, maybe than most places in US. Of course, you have, again, the United States being so big, each state almost being like a country on its own right in some regards. You have nicer places, even within the different states. You have areas, neighborhoods that look better than others. But in general, here I'm talking about in general, like if we could average everything a little bit, in general, Ireland would be safer than US. In general, education in Ireland would be better than US. It would be cheaper to go to college than in most cases in US, to an equally good college. Things look nicer, tidier. People would seem to be maybe a little bit more minding their manners a little bit more. You don't see people. One of the first shocks, especially for someone that comes from South America, was seeing that people don't yell. I'm used to yelling all the time. I had to control and lower the volume of my voice here, because we would go to a supermarket and I would hear my wife talking with one of my kids on the other end of the supermarket, because people here kind of like whisper and, you know, mind their man. Again, something common across Europe. Maybe in Spain it's not as common, in Italy not as common. Some of the Eastern European countries, they may be a little bit yelling a little bit more, but in general, yeah, Latins would yell a little bit more when talking, and even Americans would be a little bit more loud in their voice and such. So yeah, people definitely mind their manners. If you bump against anyone, they say sorry, which was surprising for me, because again, South America, if someone bumps against you, you look at them as if, what's your problem? And you know, if lucky, it's the person that bumped against you apologizes. Here, if you accidentally bump against someone, that person says sorry. Like, why are you sorry that I hit you? You're sorry that I just hit you by accident? Why should you be sorry? But that's the thing about appreciation for manners that I really like here. I think it's a very nice thing, because it makes for quality of life on daily basis. Instead of people being rude and mean, people are generally quite nice. Even though maybe the idea of friendship is a little bit different, especially compared to South America. In South America, a friend of mine would just, you know, hey, you want to get together today? Yeah, sure. Their family would come over to my place. We would, you know, do something, and hours would go by just sitting at a table talking, just talking and talking for hours, and then maybe, oh, what? Let's buy a pizza, okay? And they would stay maybe until 1 a.m. You know. Out of nothing, would spend the entire day together, and maybe make arrangements for next day, and end up spending pretty much the entire weekend together. Here it's a little bit more like people meeting for a couple of hours, or from you know, a certain, for example, for birthdays, you get the little invitation from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. and that's the time of the birthday, even at someone's house. That's something that in South America, at least in Argentina, but probably for South America in general, that's the kind of thing you only do if you hired a place for having the birthday, you know. So you have an actual schedule to follow. But if not, if it's people getting together in a house, you basically have you know, an informal agreement about meeting at some time and then spending hours together. So the ways people spend time with family and friends and such, that's a little bit different as well. Maybe a little bit more cold, a little bit more distant. So it doesn't necessarily mean less friendly, but a different kind of friendship. This maybe something within US. Again, you see that people from the South, even though they get trashed a lot, like in the media, in Hollywood and such, the idea of Southerners being ignorant and rednecks and such, at least from my perspective, I see like people from the South being more Latin in terms of friendliness. And it's not just, you know, maybe people from southern states of a Latin or Spanish heritage. People from the South in general, at least in my experience, in my opinion, are a little bit more friendlier, more open, and they have that thing that it's more common in South Americans in general. People from especially northeastern states, you know, where Boston and those places, New York and such. it's a little bit more cold. The relationships, the friendships seem to be a little bit more cold and a little bit more distant. This is a very broad generalization, and each individual case is of course different. But these are just a few of the differences you would be seeing. So this takes us back to maybe someone from a southern state, maybe warmer, friendlier, more used to being open with friends and friendlier and such. Maybe someone that comes from southern states would have more of a hard time adapting to European countries in general, including Ireland. And maybe someone from the northeasterners or such, or northern states would not have that much of a cultural shock, in spite of, yes, there will be no doubt at one, but those would be maybe one of the differences. In general, people here are friendly, but in their own way. You have the typical pubs and such, and people drinking and such, but there's still a different perspective of what friendship and even family is like here. One of the things that really surprised me is that people here don't, when they have dinner, the thing of dinner, tea, lunch seems to be a big mess, and anyone calls it anything. But yeah, at least for me, at least for the purposes of this video, dinner is going to be like the last meal of the day, maybe 6, 7, 8 p.m. Well, on that time, at least ourselves, our idea of a family and eating together is pretty important. You just all sit on the table together and eat. Here, it's more like the kids have their meals apart from the parents. So they give maybe something to eat to the kids, and they eat watching TV, and they just eat in front of the TV in a couch with a plate. And they don't even sit at a table together. That's something very weird for us. That's a little bit of a shock, at least for us, especially dinner time, lunch or dinner. If the family is under the same roof, you just all eat together. You just don't eat apart and watching TV. It would be like the time in which you share stuff and you talk. Well, just sidetrack with that. Going back to the idea, Uruguay would not be my first option for someone leaving US. I wouldn't even leave US. I would have plans to do so if needed. Ireland would be a good place, I think. But before Ireland, I would look into Canada. I mean, if you just had to leave the United States, Canada would be my first option. Within Europe, Ireland would be definitely one of the top of the list type of countries. If you have a certain appreciation, or you like Italian culture, because that's where that's where your family comes from, and maybe you speak Italian and such, of course, Italy would be a good option for you. Same thing, for Spain. I mean, my family is from Spain, but the Spanish culture was not something that I liked very much, especially not the Spanish culture that you have right now. It's very different from what we are used to in Argentina. And again, this is maybe something that Americans, as in people from the American continent entirely, have different from Europeans in general. So yeah, I think this video was a huge mess in all things considered. Trying to wrap it up a little bit, if you're in US and you're thinking about leaving because of loss of freedom, you will not find a better place than US. Just maybe think about staying, moving to some other state, or relocating within your state, something that you like better. Uruguay, is it good? Yeah, it's a good option within South America. You're still talking about South America, which is nowhere near top of the list, at least for me. If you had to go to South America, Uruguay, Chile, even Argentina to a point, out of the three, I would go with Uruguay. But still, third world, developing nations with lots of things you will not adapt to quickly. You will struggle with, no doubt. And especially with kids, you will be taking quite a bit away from them. And I don't think it's even fair for them if you have better options. Ireland, great education for kids in public schools, safe. The climate would be pretty awkward if you don't like rain. Definitely don't come to Ireland or England or Scotland, anywhere in the British Islands, because it's constantly raining almost. You have just a few nice days. In spite of that, you learn to appreciate the good things. In spite of the awful weather in general, you have good days. I mean, a couple of days ago, I was swimming in the Irish Sea. It was awfully cold, 12 degrees, but I had been working all morning, and we decided to go out for lunch. And kids being in school and such, we were talking with my wife and said, okay, let's make a couple of sandwiches and have a little picnic in the beach. 5 minutes away from where I am living, I had a very nice beach, and the weather was a little bit warmer than usual, and I just went to swim for a little bit, got out of the water, had my sandwich, changed, and 10 minutes later I was picking the kids from school and back here at home. So it has its good moments. The climate, the weather is really not. It would clearly be one of the negative things about Ireland. It can be a little bit depressing if you let that kind of thing get to you. Even though in summers you have a nice time every once in a while, folks. Another long video just talking about stuff. Hope you enjoy it. And if you have any questions, specific things you'd like to ask, just let me know in the comment section. I'll do my best to reply as quick as possible. Remember to subscribe. Have a great day. See you in our next video. Take care.